this photo, you actually see a submarine, and I'm one of the people in the submarine going to the ocean floor to do some research. And I'll be talking about that. But I want to share one feeling that I've been down there 5 times so far, and it's always the same feeling. I haven't been to space, but this must be the closest thing on Earth in terms of feeling going to space. Space and deep sea, they are actually quite similar in many aspects. They are both dark, inaccessible, and to go to them, you need to get into some cool spacecraft or submarine like this. But for the purpose of my talk, I'll highlight another commonality. Our origins, actually, the clues to our origins and our future lies in the deep sea as well as in the space, in alien worlds. And we'll be talking about that. The search for life in space is on the way, and maybe if you're following science blogs or news pages about science, the icy moons of the outer solar system are one of the prime targets of search for life nowadays. So you see here Enceladus, it's a moon of Saturn, and what you see here is ice, actually. So this moon is volcanically active, and from time to time, water plumes, actually, water vapor is ejected into the space. So that's a photo of that. So that's a place, there's water there, so water is important for search of life, of course. And of course, the usual suspect for life outside Earth has always been Mars, right? All these ancient river valleys or occasional ice caps near Martian poles have indicated us that there's water there, and also you may end up having life in Mars. So Mars is another candidate. But is water enough? Do we know what we are really looking for when we are searching for life in other places other than Earth? How much do we know about our own planet Earth, also called the blue planet, due to the presence of the oceans? So the science of the blue planet, the blue part, is called oceanography. And the oceanographers research on oceans. And here you see a global map of the oceans. The darker areas are, of course, deeper. The shallow areas are indicated by light blue. The average depth of the oceans are about 4,000 meters, so it's quite deep. And imagine that light can only penetrate in clean water to a maximum of 200 meters, and that's all. So most of the ocean volume is actually dark. It's not blue, it's dark. It's under high pressures, probably subject to very cold temperatures. So that's what oceans are. But still, the life that's living on Earth's surface, they're able to exploit the depths of oceans. We have some record breakers here. For example, a species of fur seal can dive to 240 meters and come back. Another species of elephant seal can dive to 1,500 meters. But the record belongs to the sperm whale. It can go down to 3 kilometers and stay there for 2 hours. So the ocean depths are not lifeless. Of course, there are various reasons why these creatures, they have to go deep down. But one thing for sure, there's food down there. There are unseen microscopic creatures in all ocean depths, in every place on Earth. But here I'll tell you something else. Even when you arrive in the seafloor, you'll find life. And even beyond the seafloor, in the deep Earth, nowadays we are finding life. But those type of life are not supported by sunlight as we are used to. But it's driven by the inner energy of the Earth. The volcanism, the energy that's inherent with the Earth. So nowadays we are used to the idea that the Earth's crust is composed of plates, so-called plates, which collide at certain places, and in other places they are spread apart. But this was not known until 1960s. The geologists until 1960s thought that the crust was rigid, it only moved up and down due to earthquakes. We had no clue. Partially the reason was until about the end of Second World War, the science of oceanography couldn't get started. But after that, in 50s and 60s, there were major ocean expeditions revealing the bathymetry of the ocean floor, measuring the spreading rates of the Earth's crust, etc. So we reached an understanding that the Earth is not a static place, but it's quite mobile. Things are moving around, colliding with each other. It's dynamic. Everything is changing. The result is basically there are underwater mountain chains, volcanoes completely submerged underwater. In some places you have this deep dive zones, sometimes you have this mid-ocean ridges, which means the seafloor is being produced. And what you see here in the slide is a mid-ocean ridge. It's a segment of the mid-ocean ridge in the Pacific that we've studied. And here you see basically submarine mountain chain. I'm not sure if you can realize, but on the very top of the mountain chain, there is a small axis, basically a line of Rift Valley extending along the axis of the mountain. That's where actually new ocean floor, new crust is being generated. It's literally being generated over there. But due to that, there are cracks on the seafloor. It's not a consolidated structure. There are cracks, faults, a lot of things going on. And due to that, seawater seeps through this underwater mountain and then pushed back again through these sort of structures. We call them hydrothermal vents. So what happens here? Here we are on top of that Rift Valley inside it. So hundreds of degrees Celsius water is being injected into the colder waters of the deep sea. It's a huge temperature gradient. Also, the chemistry of these hydrothermal vents are completely different from the chemistry of the bottom seawater. And you'll see in a few minutes that this difference in chemistry that is the driving force for life. And these hydrothermal vents have not been discovered until 1977. So oceanography is such a new science that it's so exciting to be one. And since in the past 40 years or so, we have been discovering new hydrothermal vent fields, new volcanoes, but there's of course a lot more to discover. So where is the life? How does this happen? To figure this out, you need to basically go there yourself, actually study this, go there yourself. So actually I have studied chemical engineering. I didn't study basic science, but I studied chemical engineering in METÜ Ankara and graduated in 2005. But during the course of my undergrad studies, I decided I want to do research about fundamental science, about nature. And I found out that I can contribute to being a chemical engineer. I can contribute to this type of natural phenomenon where chemistry actually drives life. And deep sea is where this happens. So in the grad school in the US, I was actually quite lucky because only as a second-year graduate student, my advisor took me a major ocean expedition, and I had a chance to go down with the submarine Alvin in 2007, which you see here in the upper left panel. This is the submarine that discovered Titanic. So it was quite something to be in there. And since then, I had a chance to go to the bottom of the ocean 5 times, also with French submarine Nautil. And, but we are also using robotic vehicles as well. We have heard about fourth industrial revolution. It's also happening in oceans more and more. Fast forward to the near future. I came back to Turkey as an assistant professor in METÜ in 2015 to METÜ Institute of Marine Sciences, which is just across the pond, actually, in southern Turkey. And we have also similar ships over there. But I had a joint project proposal with my colleagues back in the US. Luckily, we got funded, and we had a chance to use the research vessel Atlantis and the submarine Alvin again. So this is a research vessel, a ship, but only dedicated for ocean research. This particular research vessel is Atlantis. The name is Atlantis, and it's dedicated to hosting the submarine Alvin. So its job is to really carry Alvin around the world and the scientists within. That's how submarine Alvin looks like in a sketch. This is actually the new upgraded version of Alvin. The previous one that I dove with in 2007 was able to go down to around 4,000 meters maximum. But this one is now upgraded. It can go down to 6,000 meters with a lot more space, new sensors, new cameras. It's quite spacious to be there. It has a basket in front of it where you put samples, sensors, etc. There are, of course, two robotic arms are very crucial for manipulation, for sample collection, for data collection. So 3 people can fit into this submarine comfortably, 1 pilot and 2 observers. A typical day in such a deep-sea cruise starts with the preparation of the submarine. The submarine usually goes down early in the morning after breakfast, and after about 9-10 hours, it comes back to the board again. And here you see with the dawn, the pilot is preparing the submarine Alvin. So this is 2017, and it's 10 years after my first dive. I was able to take with me in this cruise, in this project, a graduate student from METÜ, from our institute, and I was able to introduce him the world of the deep sea. So now he's in Germany doing PhD in the deep sea area. But here you see a photo of both of us just before our dive. So one of the dives were allocated to our work, and here our photo just before climbing into the submarine. So I was occupying the left side of the submarine, so-called the port side, and we have these little portholes from which we can look to the outside, and that's great. Of course, there are also cameras inside and screens which can be used for viewing what's going on around you. And that's the moment when we arrive in the seafloor. The descent to about 2,500 meters lasts around 1 hour or 1 hour 15 minutes or so. It's actually quite dark when you go down, but as the submarine approaches the seafloor, the lights are turned on, and you start to see the world around you. Now, it's really like arriving into, I think, another planet, an alien world. It's not like blue underwater with colorful fish swimming around you. It's completely different. What you see here is basically volcanic rocks solidified pretty quickly with the action of cold seawater. And from other studies, we know that these rocks are about only 10, 15 years old. An eruption took place here very recently. As I told you, this is the place where new seafloor is being produced. This is where it happens. Our job in this particular dive wasn't always to look around, just fly around these shiny rocks, but to find the hydrothermal vents and sample them and collect data from them. It takes some searching and flying around. There is some sort of navigation there, but it really ends up in the experience of the pilot and the observers. Here we found finally our target. That's an edifice, basically, of many black smokers connected. And you can see the hydrothermal fluid being emitted to the deep ocean from the top of those towers. These structures can extend tens of meters long. They are made up of actually very precious metals, gold. There's a lot of iron, of course, but copper, zinc, gold. And that's why actually there will be deep sea mining in the future targeting these areas. But coming back to our topic, I was telling you about life around these systems. What you see here as white coating is actually life itself. That's bacteria, microorganisms forming films along the edge of those chimneys, feeding on the hydrothermal fluid, feeding on the chemicals emitted from those fluids, and building biomass. And they are all around these chimneys. The dive is a quite busy time. You need to take notes, direct the cameras, talk to the pilots, design your next set of experiments. Sometimes things don't work, as always. One sensor fails, you need to produce an alternative plan, etc. But quite busy time. It gets quite cold. It's 2 degrees Celsius around you, and you need to get on a sweatshirt or something. But our student Batuhan didn't need that. He was with a shirt all the time, all through 10 hours. Our second target was to find the rich ecosystems around the hydrothermal vents. So we knew that bacteria were not the only living things around them. We expected to find a lot more, and here they are. So what you see here is an assemblage of different invertebrates: tube worms, mussels, crabs, and fish. But these sort of systems are entirely relying on the chemical-rich fluids emitted from the cracks and from the hydrothermal chimneys, etc. So it's entirely independent of sunlight, surface Earth, entirely dependent on the rhythm of the inner Earth and the chemicals released. Particularly, these ecosystems can be so productive that, what I mean production is organic carbon per unit area, they can be as productive as a tropical rainforest in the Amazon. So now imagine what's hidden beneath the blue part of our oceans, what's hidden beneath tropical forest-like ecosystems spread along the ocean floor. Particularly fast-growing organism here is a tube worm, which you see as a white tube with a red mouth. Technically, it's not a mouth, but with that structure, let's say, the animal is able to pump the chemical-rich fluid to its interior. In its interior, there is more bacteria. So the animal is actually farming bacteria inside. It's cultivating its own bacteria, which we call symbiotic relationship in biology. And that's how they can grow that big. They can grow meters long in just a few years. One of the fastest growing invertebrates. You can also see mussels, of course, fish. There's also fish. They have a dot as in the place of their eye, but actually it's no more useless because it's dark down there. There are crabs, as I said, and altogether, each of these species is endemic to this particular location of the mid-ocean ridge. If you put them somewhere else, they will not grow. They are really endemic to this particular location. What you see here is actually quite ancient, let me stress, especially the bacteria that forms the basis of the food web here. They are, in a way, primary producers. They are like the plants and the grass of the surface Earth, but they live down there. They don't do photosynthesis, but what we call them chemosynthesis. They do chemosynthesis. And this has been more ancient than photosynthesis. This process, this lifestyle, is older than 3 billion years. And now the scientific consensus is that chemosynthesis was the first, or was the lifestyle of the first organism that evolved on Earth. And now the common thinking is that the first life form evolved in a hydrothermal vent-like environment on the very early Earth about 3.5 billion years ago. So, to summarize, we started with plate tectonics. Your planet has to be active. It cannot be static, so that hydrothermal vents can be produced, which then leads to the evolution of chemosynthetic microorganisms. And now we know that the oxygen-producing photosynthetic microorganisms evolved from the chemosynthetic ones. And the production of oxygen on our planet changed everything forever. Even the composition of rocks changed. Everything changed so that we were able to actually evolve as a species, as you've also heard from the last talk. So everything is connected. And now please rethink about what's going on in Mars or in space, in other alien worlds. Where should we search for life? In Mars, you can, but the fact that it's red means that things are more or less in equilibrium. And we know that there is not much of an active plate tectonics. If there is life on Mars, it must be in the inner part of Mars, for which there is some evidence, actually. Scientists, sometimes they measure methane with a spacecraft around Mars, sometimes not. There's a debate about that. But that's what we know so far about Mars, life on Mars. How about the icy moons of the solar system, of the outer solar system? As I told you, Enceladus is a promising one. There's an ice crust. There's water vapor plumes, there's volcanism beneath this ice. And just last year, scientists were able to finally conclude that in Enceladus, beneath this ice crust, there's about a 10-kilometer thick ocean. So there's an ocean over there. Enceladus is an ocean world. Now we call it an ocean world. And now we think that the general thinking is that there are hydrothermal vent-like systems in the bottom of Enceladus, which may host some sort of protocells or even highly evolved organisms. And luckily, from time to time, these volcanic stuff is exposed to space. They are ejected to space. So now NASA and European Space Agency, they are designing spacecraft, new missions, which will fly through these plumes. They will carry probably a genetic analyzer, and they will analyze the DNA as we go. So in a few decades, we will have news from a spacecraft flying around Enceladus about the search for life in the solar system. So you see, in just a few decades of studying blue planet, look at how much we learned. But there's a lot more to learn. We have still not discovered a majority of our oceans, the seafloor. We don't know a majority of the species, especially on the microbial side. So there's a lot to do on the origin of life, but the oceans are also our future. We will increasingly rely on oceans for food security, for energy, for new minerals, metals, especially precious ones. So there will be more pressure on oceans. So we have to be aware of ocean's potential, but also start protecting it before long. Thank you.